When Pastor Steve asked me to talk about this, he was asking me kind of give a sense of what's going on with startups, with the venture community, with the tech community, how people are actually reacting. I actually work with an artificial intelligence company, so he said if you can talk a little bit about that too. Oh, there we go. Now we're really in. And so I'm going to try to give you a little sense of what it's like to go through this. And I want you to know, when you're thinking about, if you want to, my area of expertise and focus is around venture, startup, technology. So my whole career in that, I've done 3 companies, sold the last 2, and I can tell you that it's a wild and woolly ride. I wouldn't have it any other way. I think it's exciting. It never changes. It's sometimes scary, and that's all right. But when I go through this, I have so much respect for people who build traditional businesses that can't go burn $1 million a month and not care, because I wouldn't know how to do it. So people that build traditional small businesses and then build it up and are so successful, I have so much respect for it. I think it's harder than what I do. But my view and my perspective and my point of view will come from that. One other ground rule, and then I'm going to jump into it here. The other ground rule is, if you're thinking about doing a startup, if you've thought about it, I just ask you to listen to God's word. Listen to the Spirit in his life, in your life, excuse me. Nobody like wakes up and suddenly goes, oh, I'm going to go build a business. If you do, you might be a little weird, but that's all right. The thing is if he's calling you to do something, stop for a minute, slow down, and listen to the Spirit. Every morning, I pray to ask for wisdom from the Spirit. Am I following the right way? Am I leading these people? I take very seriously that, I have a lot of families dependent upon what we do, and that we have to make sure that we're doing the right things. And I'm not the smartest guy in the world, so I need a lot of help. And so if God is involved in your life, and if I have enough time in the end, I'll tell you a little story about how I know God was involved in this one in a massive way. Because there's no way my backers and how we get aligned comes together unless the Lord is just nudging people along. And so remind me, and I might be able to tell that story. But let's go a little bit now into, do you really want to build the startup? Okay, I've got the clicker. Let's see if it works. Okay, starting point. If you're going to build a startup, you ultimately are going to be asked, we're once again talking venture startup here, it's tech startup, et cetera, you're going to have to put together what they call a pitch deck, which really is just your business plan. How are you going to put together the business plan? And so it's a good possibility, it's a chance to think through, what do we need to do? What are we going to have to go through? So let's go through the steps real quick, and then I'm going to show you a use case, which is actually going to be a company that I now run, which was my original deck, so don't make fun of it. And then I want to talk a little bit about some things around culture and some of the main themes, and then we'll wrap up, and if we have some time for Q&A. So, 1, what's the challenge you're trying to solve? This is the big solution. This is a great idea. Like, what are you going to go do? Once again, if you're listening to the Spirit, if you're listening to those around you, if you're open and have the receptors up and are talking to people and constantly just questioning people, you might come up with a problem that you want to solve, or a pain. You know how I have some people have told me that when they've started like companies that are just massively large, they're like, look, I was dealing with this totally terrible situation over and over and over and over again in my life, and I finally said, I can't be the only person that thinks this is dumb. I might be able to start a company there. So I often tell people, look for pain, look for problems. You do not want to have a solution that is what they call a vitamin. You want to have a solution that is called a painkiller. And the reason being is people only take vitamins when things are good. I forget a lot. Painkillers, boy, when you got a pain, and get the knee going or something like that, you're going to do it. So build something that focuses on that, 1. 2, and by the way, I'm very proud of myself. I got the little things that go like in and out like that. That takes a lot of effort, guys. Come on. Okay, nobody cares. Anyway, solution. Make sure it's unique. If you come up and say, I have the greatest solution in the world, I figured out one-click buying for e-commerce is going to be awesome. Might be somebody that's done that. Could be, possibly. It has to have a unique aspect to it. And so when you're thinking about unique, think about the problem you're trying to solve. Think about, are you approaching the problem in a way that nobody's thought about it? I promise you, everyone in this room has had a unique idea at some point in time that has been inspired or from some of your experiences that would have made a business, and you're like, God, I should really do something about that. And then you go on and forget all about it. One of the things I did when I was starting the company that I'm in now is I was constantly just writing down ideas into Evernote. If people don't know what Evernote is, it's like Microsoft Notes. I like Evernote better. And just capturing ideas. And I wasn't judging them. That's a really important thing, by the way. Just capture them. Just get them there. You never know what's going to throw out there when you've got an inspiration. And capture it in the moment. Have it in a task manager. Pull up Evernote on your phone or whatever the case may be. And I would write them down. And then later on, I would go back and look at them and start to see them, break them down and flesh them out and ask, is this really unique? Some of them were just utterly stupid. Like they were really not good ideas. But that's all right. Because I was open and I kept things flow, other ideas were really good. In fact, I came up with a second idea that I ended up not doing, but I still was convinced would have been a great company, but this one I felt was better, and that's the one I went with. 2, 3. See that? Came up from the top. That's pretty cool, eh? Total addressable market. Basically, this is what's the size of the opportunity that you're going to go solve. So if it's really small, like let's say the total market is $50 million in spend. You put together some math, and by the way, people always go, how do you get that? Do you got to go to Gartner, or you got to go to some other analyst? Or how do you get these like fancy numbers? I'm going to give everyone a clue. It's all made up. Big time made up. You make a number, you kind of go, I think people will pay this much for that. And you say, well, how many people might buy something like that? And you, by the way, you find something to justify these numbers. Something. It doesn't have to be right. Venture guys in the venture community, like they've seen people come by and like, oh, I've got a $100 trillion idea. Oh, I'd love to see your math behind that one, buddy. Considering the U.S. economy is just a little over 20 trillion. But whatever it is, get some justification behind it, put it together, kind of size up. Ask a couple people, does this smell all right? Does it look like it's somewhat plausible? And that's all you have to do. It has to be somewhat plausible. And then that's your market size. This is important for a couple reasons. If you're solving a problem that has a market opportunity to say $10 billion, then if you come in and your pitch deck, ultimately you want to raise $20 million, well, that's not a lot of money if you're going after a $10 billion opportunity. But if on your t-shirt sizing, which is small, medium, large, your opportunity happens to be something that is like, that's a $100 million market. Well, you better not raise too much money. If you raise 20 million, then you're going to have 20% of the market just to capture what you already raised. And so this comes into, there's things you learn over time. And I'm always happy to be a advice for these people that really want to fall on this because it's a lot of detail. But your amount raised has to be corollary to your opportunity. And when you're thinking about these things. And so there's some people that are really, really good at raising just a couple $1 million and selling companies for $40 to $80 million. Why? Because the total market is just a couple $100 million or maybe a $500 million. And so they're finding a functional fit. There's other companies like what we're trying to build, well, we're trying to be worth billions of dollars. And so because the opportunity is even significantly larger than that, so you can raise 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, or hundreds of millions of dollars, depending upon the situation. There's a different discussion on whether that's the right thing or not, and it's all right. So just keep in mind, total addressable market will decide when you're asking money later on in pitching, like what's realistic and what's not. Okay, next one. Product. Then you got to have some type of product. I've oftentimes had people when they're thinking about doing startups and I'm culturing them or talking to them, they're convinced the product has to be all perfect right out of the gate. They call it a minimum viable product, MVP, for a reason. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, it can be cruddy. It just has to get across the point to potential buyers, to potential investors, to your own team. It has to just basically work. Don't gild the lily. No gold plating is necessary. Less money, less time. The number one thing is when you're building a business, and by the way, I don't care what the size of business is, but it's incredibly true for startups, is time is everything. It's your enemy. It's never your friend. And so you have to move quickly. And so keep it small, keep it focused, keep it delivering and showing exactly the minimum opportunity that you're after. 2, last, or 6, I can't count. I'm an English major, by the way. I run an artificial intelligence company. I have tons of PhDs working for me. I have an English degree, but I do have, and this is my secret weapon, I have a minor in German and history. Very much throws my data scientists out the loop when I speak German to them. Okay, go-to-market strategy. All this is what's your business model? How are you going to take this thing out? Once again, you don't have to have it all sorted out. You just have to have a plausible thesis. So don't worry about, oh my God, somebody goes, that would never work. All you have to do is if you ask a half a dozen people, and by the way, when I started this last company, I think I interviewed 50 different executives that had, some of them I knew well, some of them I didn't know at all, and I got networked into them. And they all had different areas of expertise. So I didn't just go ask my, next door neighbor, what do you think? Because my next door neighbor doesn't know anything about what I was trying to do. By the way, just a side note for mentorship, if you're looking for advice, try to find people that have done what you want to do. I know your friends are usually the safest spot, but if they've not done anything more than you, then how are they going to impart any wisdom to you on this thing? Find somebody who's been successful or has learned through their success. And so what I did, I wanted to start an artificial intelligence company. I'd never started an AI company. So I went and talked to a bunch of data scientists who did that all day long, every single day. I talked to a bunch of people. We happen to be between education and HR. So I talked to a quad load of chief people officers. And I talked to a ton of chancellors, provosts, deans, and talent acquisition, talent management people, and data engineers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why? Because they actually had good feedback from what my idea was. So when you're thinking about your go-to-market strategy, all it has to do is be left plausible. Ideally, if you get it right, great. Best what? My first business go-to-market strategy idea, the overall thesis idea was great. The actual execution was so far off the mix, it's not even funny. It's right, didn't kill us, we're fine. Just come up with something plausible. And then you have to ask the question, is there a competitor out there? Is there someone who's already doing this really well? Or if you do it really well, will they go suddenly start doing it really well? Because that's going to be a question. It's like decides what's your competition going to be like, where's it going to come from, how you're thinking about it, and what can we learn from? Because you don't want to be the me too if you're the new guy on the block. You're coming with your unique idea, right? Yeah, go and execute it, and you start to get some traction. Can somebody just come in and roll you over? By the way, people who give you money are going to want to know this. They're going to want to understand. Do you understand your competitors? And then the team. When you're doing the founding team, just as a rule of thumb, 2's better than 1. 3, 4, 5, not so good. The reason being is too many people have to actually agree. I can't get my 3 sons to agree on even what they want to eat for dinner. If you can get 3 to 5 founders to agree on what they want to do every day, you are a special person. And so I would say 2's better than 1 because when you're down, hopefully they'll be up. And when they're up or they're down, you'll be up. It is, by the way, it's a lonely, hard road. I would honestly tell all of you, do not do this. I mean, joking aside, it's so much fun. It really is a blast, but it is a hard road. And I'm going to get to that, but 2 is better than 1 always. And I think I have one more. They ask, and then you got to decide what do you want to ask them for. If you're doing a pitch deck, you ask them for some money, and it's so radically changed. Seed rounds, when I did my first company in 2010, were usually like $250,000 to $500,000. The seed round for our current company was ultimately 3 allotments for $6 million. If you nobody did that in 2010. In 2023, oh yeah, I hear people, I got a $10 million seed round. Well, that was like my whole, like that funded my whole first company practically. What are you talking about? Seed round? Things have changed. It's because there's a lot of capital out there that is looking for good places, which, by the way, is opportunity if you have a good idea and you're willing to work. So just think about what your game plan is, and then you got to tell them, here's how I'm going to go spend it. Because they're not giving it to you so you can sit on it and collect T-bills. Think about the milestones and the justification. That should justify the ask, because you're trying to get to another milestone so you can raise more money. So that's how you put together a pitch deck. Those are the things that you need to ask when you're going through the process. Now, I'll give you a very quick use case. I'll actually use my company. I use this deck to walk in to my first pitch with a gentleman who I respect very much, John Connors. He's now a very, very close friend and mentor of mine. He used to be the CFO of Microsoft. John, super strong Christian, which I very much appreciate, and he walks that walk, and he's been a leader for me. But he runs, at the time, a firm called Ignition, which is now it's not raising more funds. And so I used this pitch deck with them, went in, gave the pitch. They gave me $1 million after. And so literally it was like the next day they called up and went, okay, yeah, we're in. Now, I did have an advantage, I want you to know. They'd already made like a lot of money off one of my companies. So I wasn't walking in like green, but that's how these things sometimes happen. So real quick, we'll do speed dating. This was my challenge. Woo! I'm going to help students. We're going to find out how to break down that information asymmetry gap between industry and education so people can really understand how to leverage education quantitatively to get to better outcomes. I had this concept that trusted data, longitudinal data, or data that's from both sides of the market, from lots of different sources like your HR systems and your educational student information systems, et cetera. If you could use that to break down skills, you could get to an understanding of really what people have and bring to the table from distance travel, those learning and working experiences. And so I had this thesis I put together that if we could do that, we can help people actually quantify education, get to ROI, and get to better outcomes. And then I think HR needs this because it's like a hit and miss all over the place. And education needs it because it doesn't understand what it's actually trying to create in a product, which is people with skills. And so this was the raw market opportunity. It's at $178 billion, so I could ask for $1 million right up front, nobody mind. And so this was like, this is all the higher education students, US, it's all the secondary. I said, big, big opportunity. Okay, great. By the way, those numbers were, like, I said the fudge, lots of fudge in that numbers. Then I had this concept, okay, we're gonna do some analytics, outside outcomes. By the way, this was only semi-right when it all came out. Did some quick mock-ups, so it kind of looked pretty, people go, ooh, ah. By the way, if you're doing a pitch deck and you actually do go through this process, it's worthwhile to spend enough money to get a designer to actually make the thing look better versus just putting it up all yourself. It's minor stuff, but it's worthwhile. I had a go-to-market approach, a business plan. This conceptually was right. How I executed it, totally off base. First way we went, failed completely. Didn't stop us though, because we had a thesis. We knew that this MVP is called product market fit is called product market fit for a reason. You try, you quickly fail. 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 And so we found ways that we could actually scale that out now. Then you say, who's the team? Hey, I'm a lot younger then, by the way. We had a couple people, we had some good advisors. Then we said, here, we're asking for $1 million. And we're gonna go do these things. And so the idea is you kind of tell the story. I mean, you really are a storyteller if you're an entrepreneur. You're trying to get people to believe in something that is not in front of you. I mean, you better be a little bit inspired by God if you're trying to do something like that. I mean, you're gonna need a lot of help because the odds say you'll fail. It's 1 in 10 that successfully starts a startup. And by the way, that success is not, hey, I made a lot of money. That success just might be you got your money back to your investors and you made nothing. I mean, I've been in that too, by the way. And so a little bit of things. We talked about culture earlier. These are two other areas I want to hit on because I think they're so important. I'm going to use up too much of my time, but one, it will happen whether you like it or not. You'll either build it or it will just happen. Culture is what you want it to be. I mentioned earlier that I walked into my company and I knew exactly what I wanted because I had done everything wrong prior to there. I only had one option to finally accidentally get it right. And so you've got to design it. You've got to think about it. You've got to map it out. You've got to think about what you want it to be. And then you've got to talk about it constantly. We have a big thing in our culture, which is over-communicate. Over-communicate, over-communicate, over-communicate. I heard a CEO one time say, I notice people actually know what I mean when I've said it 15 times. And I kind of chuckled, and she wasn't laughing. She was dead serious. I mean, you have to say these things over and over and over and over again. I have a bunch of my engineers who jokingly say, we speak Atom, which is code word for the first time I say it, they're looking at me like, where's the Atom speaker? Can we get the Atom speaker over here? We need to understand. And so I work better at trying to over-communicate, but I keep saying it over and over, and they get some sense. Culture, talk about it all the time. Bias for action. We have a phrase called circles of trust. Circles of trust are so critically important. People will only push as much as they feel they're safe to push. If you're doing a startup, what do you want people to do? You want people to push themselves to failure. You actually want them to fail. Now, I have a bunch of engineers that work for me, so they said, what percentage of failure are we allowed to do? I'd actually never been asked the question, because an English major wouldn't think like that, right? And I said, I'm accepting 10 to 20%. And I told them this, I said, I will underwrite your failure. It's education. I only have two requests in this equation. One, I want to make sure that you learn from that failure so that you don't recreate it. And two, I want you to share those learnings with your peers. Because I just paid for you to go to graduate school. We better get something out of it. And I don't care about the degree. I don't want the paper, I want the learnings. And I want to push that into the rest of the culture. Now, you only do that if the person will only push themselves to failure if they feel comfortable enough that no one will judge them, that they will be all right. They won't lose their job. So I tell people all the time, I'm going to push you to failure. I know you're going to fail. It's not my objective, but I know you're going to fail, and that's all right. It's good. We learn. We grow. This is how we do it. And there's an example of, my mission statement. We have this doc. Everyone in the company has access to it. We amend it at times. There's 7 cultural components that we are very fixated on. I talk about it in my weekly thoughts. I attach it to the end, and I ask people to read when I send out a note every other week. I do on Sunday nights. I typically try to send something out. Always talking about this. Simple rules to live by in building a company, and then I'll wrap up. Sports team. You ever been in your company and somebody says, we're a family? And then they fire you. I don't know. I always tell people, look, if we were a family and you're my lazy brother-in-law, I can't fire you. I'm stuck with you. I mean, my mom and dad might come after me if I fire you, or your mom and dad, or my wife, my sister, whatever. No, we are not a family. And I tell this to people day one. We're a sports team. We're a sports team. My job as coach is to maximize your potential, to help you grow. And I'm hoping your growth aligns with the company's needs and growth. But I know that there might be a day where yours will go different or ours will go different. And that's all right. Free agency is a real thing. But get this. I have expectations, and if you don't do it, and my first job is to help you figure out why not. And then if your job is to respond. And if you can't do that, at a certain point, then my job is to fire you. And that's the way this goes, because I'm looking after the body politic, the entire team and the objectives we're after. They're just thinking about their particular situation. Now, does that not mean I can't still love you? Well, I can love you. I love some of the people that work for me. I care for them deeply. I know their families. But they have a job and I have a job. And so, sports team, not family. No jackwagon rule. By the way, I actually don't call it jackwagon in our thing. It's a dirty word, but I figured if I did that here, I would get in trouble. But the bottom line is, no jerks. No jerks. Life's too short. You got to spend the majority of your waking time with a bunch of people you work with versus your family. You don't want a jerk who's constantly nothing but negative. We weed them out in the interview process. We look for them, but I'm going to tell you, when they get them in, if we can't change them, we fire them. It's just, I do not accept it. Life's too short. I already mentioned underwriting failure, but trust allows that. Like I said, this one took me a long time to get my head around, really, the concept of trust and letting people feel comfortable enough. But it's so important. That comes from culture, good culture. Only 3 things happen naturally in organizations: friction, confusion, and underperformance. Everything else requires leadership. And by the way, that leadership extends to all of you and whatever you do. You are examples for your peers when you even reason. I don't think you go, well, I'm a brand new employee in the front. Don't worry, they're looking at you. They're wondering if you're going to change something. We all drive some of that. Okay, literally the last problem. Mindset. What does it take to build a startup? Be all in. No one will ever be more committed than you. You cannot ask somebody, hey, you go do stuff that I don't want to do, but I'm going to go watch some football. I do like watching the Chiefs, as I mentioned earlier. And so, 1, be all in. It's so critical. You will have down times. Find your way to find the inspiration. I'll tell you one way to do that is to, when you feel like you're totally overwhelmed, focus on the things you can actually do something about. Don't focus on things you can't control. It's a waste of time. You want to worry about all the things that might control? Just focus on what you control. Okay, being all in. Did I mention it's important? Really? I mean, trust me, when you're trying to raise money, or you're up against it, or you've got just a couple of employees who have finally bought in to this is going to be big. If you're on the down dauber, and you're not up and inspired, and you're not trying to be positive, and saying, don't worry, there's something we can make out of this, you think they're going to be looking for another job. No, really, I'm not kidding. It matters. I jokingly did this because I think everybody needs to just understand it's a lonely road. You'll have the Lord and you'll have you. And sometimes you might even get lucky and your spouse will go, I'm on board with you as well. My wife thought when we did the 3rd company, she's like, you're just nuts. Really, you're signing up for this again? But I felt like I had a calling to do it. Persistence is everything. You must fight through. You must push. You must not stop. Keep and measure all your goals. Track against them. If you go, I've got a goal, but I can't really measure it or something, that's not a goal. That's just like a wish. If you don't put dates, by the way, next to things, then you're totally going to mess up. You must have dates too. Steve Jobs, whether you like him or not, he was successful, at least in business. Perseverance is everything. It drives the whole process. And so I would say, if you're going to do this, pray a lot. I'll wrap with this little story. For people that were doing new startups the last couple of years, if you're doing it in the pandemic, you couldn't have asked for the potentially best opportunity or worst opportunity of your life, depending upon how you'd like to look at it. I try to take a stoic philosophy, which means I try to find the pathway through the obstacle. I'm looking for the positives when something hits, trying to find out where's the opportunity in this. There's got to be one. Sometimes that's a little harder than others. I can tell you that I know God wanted us to do what we do, and I'm glad I pray for it, because currently our largest investor is a firm out of St. Louis called Kingdom Capital. The founder of that firm is the 2nd wealthiest African American in the country. A gentleman by the name is Dave Stewart. He's a mentor and a friend of mine, and I'm greatly appreciative of his leadership. He founded the largest private minority-owned company in the country, a $17 billion systems integrator company, which he's chairman of them and our chairman as well. How did I meet Dave Stewart? Here's why I know God is involved in everything, and then I'm done. University of Washington's a client. The vice provost there, had an anecdotal meeting with a rep from Worldwide. And he said, you should check out this company called AskFromU. Now, didn't give any contact information. He said, the guy's name's Adam Wray. You should check it out. The rep Blind reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, UW said we should talk. And I'm like, well, that's my client. Well, I'm going to talk. So I get together with him lunch, and he's like, oh my gosh, we could take this offer and we could do stuff with you. He introduces me to his manager, who introduces me to the vice president who runs the $4 billion unit. I become friends with both of them. And then the VP says, you should meet Dave. And so I went and met Dave. Dave's like, this is incredible. We could change the world. And he becomes an investor. And now, without that backing and support, I don't know whether we would have gotten through all the ups and downs the last year. All because one person went, hey, you should talk to it. And the rep was willing to do the reach out. How do you like that for a business plan for your investment? I'm going to have salespeople just randomly talk about other people and hope that they actually hit me. But you have to know God's involved. There's no way that happens with any other way. And then on top of it, Dave's what they call affectionately patient capital. So he was willing to work through some ups and downs. And by the way, pandemic has a little up and down. And so I feel very blessed. I hope this has maybe helped a little bit. I know we don't have any time, so I'll cheat and say if you want to have some Q&A after, I'm glad to, but thank you for the time.